Hi, Tiffany. Thank you so
Oh,
much for accepting my invite to come here and do this interview, to share a little bit about your knowledge and your experience into web development. So first thing that we could do is just like if you could introduce yourself, just let everybody know who you are.
okay. Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm a web developer. I went through a coding boot camp like last year, but before that I was doing some self-teaching stuff as well. I have my own YouTube channel as well where I share some of my experiences and some day-to-day activities, and I'm just excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Selma.
Great, great, great. So I'm gonna put first of all in the link description down below the link to Tiffany's channel if you guys want to check out and check her awesome content in there and check how was her progress and everything. So yeah, so now Tiffany, maybe you could start now talking about like your experience, like as you said that you got into a coding boot camp. Maybe you could tell us like how was like that, what you were doing before, how did you got like what made you go into this boot camp and your experience in general.
Yeah, for sure. So I learned about coding a long time ago. So like 2000, maybe 8 or so. And back then I was in college and I learned it from a person that I was in an organization with. And she told me that she was doing web development stuff and I thought it was cool. And so I went through the process of, changing my major to management information systems, which that's basically business and computer science mixed together, because I still wanted to do business stuff. So after that, after some computer science classes, really was into it. I graduated college about 2011, and then my plan was to go out and conquer the world with my web development skills. And so that did not happen right away. So I ended up just taking another job like a year later.
So
Um,
let me just interrupt you.
yeah,
What
sure.
what happened there? Because you finished college and you thought
Mhm.
that you could get a job like straight away. And what were like your struggles? What happened because you thought that you could get a job and all of a sudden you couldn't get? So
Mhm.
yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So basically, I had a couple of projects I was working on while I was in college. So we did group projects, and in my mind, I thought that would be enough to go out and get a job in the field. And so when I started talking to recruiters and things like that, they were like, well, you don't really have enough experience, and we're looking for someone with a little bit more experience, probably about a year or two, and I didn't have that. So um, after I think it was about a year that I was looking for a job in the field or so. And then I said, you know what, at this point, I just have to get a job. So that's kind of how I kind of turned my direction away from web development, because at that point I was like, I just have to work because I haven't been working this whole time. So a lot of the feedback I heard at that time was, like I said, I didn't have enough experience to do so. So that's why I was like, oh, okay, well, I was thinking, how do you get experience if you're not going to give me a job to get
Exactly,
the
exactly.
experience? So I'm like, okay, so let me turn my attention to the real life for a little bit, and then I'll probably circle around and come back to it. And that's exactly what I did. So after I got my job that I had, it was basically looking up information, doing like research stuff.
So
Not very exciting.
was it like related to web development or not really? Was just like a general job?
Well, here's the thing though, and that's one thing that I tell people too. Watch out for job descriptions, watch out for the job titles, because the job title that I was sold on was database administrator, I think it was, something along database administrator. But when I got there, it was just working to create information, like to find information that they could then put into their database. And so I wasn't the person that was administering the database. I was the person that was researching the internet so information could be put into the database. And they already had like an interface for it. So
Mhm.
you basically just go in and type information and this stuff gets saved in the database. So That's why I'm always telling people, watch out for job description.
Was not really what you were looking for in there, no?
Exactly. It was not at all. It was not at all. It was a pretty funny story because when I was, that job was supposed to have like 6 people in the interview. They had an interview set for Monday morning at like 8 o'clock, and me and another person showed up, and the other lady, I think she worked too far away, so they went ahead and went with me. And I was like, really? So it's actually kind of funny because I'm like, where is everybody for this job? And at that point, it didn't really, click that maybe this wasn't what they were looking for, and it wasn't what I was looking for either. But it didn't last long. I actually got laid off at that job after 6 months. So I think it worked out for everybody. So everything happens for a reason.
Exactly. So you went into this job, yeah, because you like you said, you wanted to do something because you were already 1 year out without working in a actual real job. So what was like your next steps? You said that, okay, I had done some projects and I was talking with some recruiters. They said it was not enough. So I decided, okay, let's go for a real job. So you took this time to work in a real job. So what was like your next steps? You were already like demotivated, or I can't get a job into web development, or what was in your mind?
So at that point, after I got laid off from the other one, I was basically just like, okay, now this time, hopefully I'm going to find a job that has to do with at least a technical field that I want to be in, so that maybe I could transfer over into something else. So I spent a couple of months looking for a job, had some leads, some didn't work out. I ended up taking a job at a life insurance company. And so what I was doing there, what they call that job? Data integrity analyst. That's what that job was called. So data integrity analyst. And so I was like, okay, this isn't too bad. And again, in the job description, it was like, oh, might do some SQL. I said, well, I can do SQL because I had done SQL before, like in school and stuff. I was like, I could do that. So again, just me being, not really paying attention in the interview. And you can kind of tell in interviews as well, because there wasn't a lot of questions being asked. And the people that were hiring, they hadn't hired in a long time, so they didn't really know what they were looking for. Right. And the job description was old from a couple of years ago. So it's just a whole bunch of things. But I ended up taking that job simply because at the same time, like, there was really no other options at that point. And I knew in order to get that technical job, I would need the experience. And I know I didn't have that at that time either. So when I got that job, honestly, I was still looking for another job. Like, I didn't stop.
Exactly.
Like, I could tell, like, when you get at a job, I've been there for like 3 weeks or so, and the person training me was like, and that's it. And I'm like, oh, I can't do this for a long time.
You had a feeling like, no, this is not for me.
Exactly. I was like, nah, I can't do that. So let me try to look other places. So while I was at that job, I ended up looking for other positions and things, and I got interviews, but it was the same old stuff again, right? You don't have the experience, Tiffany. And I'm like, crap. So at this point, I didn't know about any online tools to learn. I just knew about what I had learned in college. And so I didn't realize that there were tools online that could help me to learn until I stumbled upon them. And so I ended up staying at that job at the life insurance company for 3 years. So that was a heck of a lot longer than I wanted to do. But I tried to embrace it for what it was. And it was like my first real corporate job. So I chose to use that to kind of figure out how to figure out the corporate world and how to work with people and things like that, and then different management and things like that. So I didn't want to waste the opportunity, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do. I was like, let me just embrace it. Let me get to know the people. Let me try to do things. So while I was there, I think it was, and I get cloudy on days and times and when things happen. But I'll say probably when I was there for like 6 months, maybe, I found out about like Codecademy. And I was like, oh, cool. I could do this like on breaks and on lunchtime and things like that. And I could, utilize the time while I'm at work in order to do this, so I could still keep up with the skill set I had learned a few years ago. So I ended up going on there. Found another app as well that I had on my tablet. I used to take like a tablet with me to work all the time as well. And I cannot remember the name of that app, but I can send it to you afterwards if you want me to. But it was basically like to learn JavaScript and stuff like that. And they had different things that you could learn, different languages that you could learn. And I utilized that. And so on breaks and like I said, at lunch, I would, be on the tablet looking at stuff to code. And then when I got home, I did more of it. And so, yeah, that's basically how I started to be like, okay, let me get back into what I started, a few years ago. And so after a few years, like I said, I was at that company for 3 years. So after a few years, I was like, I had heard about coding boot camps. And at the time, I was like, I don't really know. That's a lot of money to spend on something that you're not really sure about. And I kind of wasn't really interested. And plus, a lot of the ones I saw were further away from me. I live in Texas. And so there wasn't a lot of coding boot camps like in Texas. They were like in California and New York and things like that. But that's too far away from where I was at. And I could not afford to live out there and do the coding boot camp. So I kind of tabled the idea, and then I started looking up reviews a little bit later, and I found some that were actually in Dallas, and I was like, which is the city that I live in Texas. And so I started, and I'm like, oh, well, this is close to me. I could do this. And so I started to do more research about it. Course Report, I was on there looking at reviews, and I was trying to find blogs and things like that.
What was the name of that bootcamp?
The boot camp that I went to?
Yeah,
the boot camp I went to is called Coding Dojo. Yeah, so that's the one I ended up going with. And the reason why for me it was, they taught 3 languages, but one of them at the time, they don't do PHP anymore, but they were doing PHP. And I had learned PHP, in college, and I was, like, oh, I can get back to doing that. So, and I thought it was cool back then, and I was like, well.
So what they were teaching? JavaScript, PHP, and what else?
Ruby on Rails.
Right, yeah. Okay. So JavaScript, PHP, and Ruby on Rails.
Yeah, so those were the 3 that they were teaching. And I was like, I'd never had done Ruby on Rails before, but I was like, oh, it's okay, and so I decided to go ahead and apply for the coding boot camp, and then kind of just went with it because I didn't know what was going to happen. But I was like, you know what, let me just take the chance. Let me just apply.
So let me just ask you like this. What was going through your mind like when you decided, okay, I can't do this on my own. I need to go through a boot camp where people will just like look after me and my education, or how was it? Why did you decide to go to this boot camp?
Yeah, a lot of it was that I did, like I said, I was doing a lot on my own, like the self-study on my own. And I was like, you know what, it would be a good idea, and it may not be such a bad idea for me to be in a group setting to where I could just focus on doing this one thing. Because like a year before that, I've been telling my family, I was like, you know what, if I could just code all day, I can get a job as a web developer. And so fast forward to like a year later, and I was like, you know what, this could make it to where I could code all day, and then I can get the skills I need. Because I knew that if I could just sit down and do it, I had done it before. So I was like, I know if I could just sit down and just focus, then I can be able to really put my all into this.
So was it like a full-time boot camp?
Yes, yeah. It was a full-time boot camp. So that was a little bit of a worry too, because I had a full-time job, and like I said, I didn't like that job, but still I was like, leaving security was scary. But I had saved throughout the years anyway. I'm a big saver. So I saved and I planned, and I said, okay, with X amount of dollars, I know I can do this and this. I could live off, for this amount of time. And it helped at that time that I lived with my parents. So it was like that offset some of the costs as well. So it was just a matter of like me just going through the process at that point, because I had the plan of, okay, I could afford to do this. The only thing I couldn't afford is to actually pay for the entire boot camp, because they're expensive.
What was the price of the boot camp?
Okay, so ours was like an introductory rate because it was the first time they were in our area. So I think it was about $9,500 total for the whole boot camp, and it may have been a little bit more than that, but I had like a scholarship as well, and it wasn't
Hmm.
too much of a scholarship, but still it helped offset the cost a little bit. But when I went through the application process, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to take out a loan in order to pay for the coding boot camp. I have living expenses, but I do not have the money to pay for the coding boot camp.
Yeah, because
So
that's really a lot of money,
it is.
$9,500. Yeah.
It is. And believe it or not, there was actually one guy who paid for the whole thing like out of pocket. He was like, here it is. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
aren't you fancy? But yeah, so when I went through the application process and I got accepted and things like that, I was like, okay, I need to fill out loan stuff. So I filled out loan information and I got rejected. And I was like, okay, this is it. I can't do
Yeah.
it. I was kind of like, I can't do it. And I actually sent a message to Coding Dojo's application team. And I was like, hey guys, I got rejected for this and I cannot do this without the loan money in order to do it. And they sent me another loan company that normally approves people. So I was able to get approved through them. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm back on again. So after that, I believe that was in February when I was going through that process. And this was, what year was this? Like 2014, maybe, I want to say, or something like that. But don't quote me on that because I don't remember. But yeah, so it was around that time. And I had, at that point, like I said, been at my job for 3 years. I had to go and tell my boss, like, hey, so I'm not going to be coming back anymore. So, but I had a good relationship with my boss at the time. And so she was like, Tiffany, I know you're super smart. I know you could do this. And I wish you the best of luck. And I'm like, okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
So
No,
I went
make you feel
ahead and went
like
through.
the bad guy or something.
Yeah, it's always tough when you quit a job. It's like, ooh,
Yeah.
how do you say anything? And that was the first time I quit a job because prior to that, my only other job I got laid off from. So I was like, ooh, how do I tell people I'm not
Yeah.
going to be here anymore? But yeah, I started the boot camp a week after my last day at my job, and or actually the following week, or the following Monday at my last day at my job. And so I started the boot camp. It was, I saved a little bit because I didn't have to drive back and forth. I took public transportation there. And then I was at the boot camp 8 a.m. to, like, I stayed till about 6:30, maybe 7 o'clock some days. And then I'd go home, take the train ride home, do some studying. And then also when I got home, I would do some more studying as well. So it takes a lot. It takes a lot,
Yeah.
but I think it's really rewarding, especially if it's something that you want to do. I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, do some self-study on your own. If they're thinking about a coding boot camp, I say do some self-studying on your own before you fully commit to the coding boot camp because it's a full-time thing. And we started out with like 25 people or so, maybe even more than that in our group at Coding Dojo, and it ended up being like 12 that, lasted to the end. So
So
it's not for everybody.
there were some people like quitting in the middle, you mean?
Yeah, a lot of some of them quit in the beginning, some of them quit in the middle. And I think what it was some of them, I think there was at least one guy who came from like Philadelphia, which is another state. And so he came from a different state over here and he hadn't had any prior experience coding. And then there was another lady, coding dojo was a little bit too much curriculum for her, so she just moved to a different coding boot camp,
Hmm.
but she was still coding. And then some of the other people, I don't actually know what happened to them. They just kind of just stopped coming, and I don't really know what happened. But so I think what it boils down to is people just not being prepared to, not knowing what to expect, not being prepared, and then not knowing, like, you have to be all in. Like, if
Yeah,
you're going to
exactly.
code, then you got to code. Like, you got to love to do this or else you're going to hate it. So
Yeah.
it's just like any other job. Like, you gotta want to love what you're going to do. So, yeah, so it doesn't work for everybody, but it's definitely a good option if you know that you want to code and that you just need some kind of like structure to your coding. So
So you went through these boot camp. How long did it took you? Around 3 months, maybe?
yeah, it was a 3 month coding boot camp. So we did one language every month. So we started out doing PHP and we learned the framework Code Igniter as well to do object-oriented programming, stuff like that. And then the second month we did Angular and, JavaScript and MongoDB. And then the third month we did Ruby on Rails and yeah, we learned the Rails framework. So yeah, it was like I said, intense, but it was good to learn. And once you learn like one of them, like we were pretty much good with the rest of them. So that helped a lot. It's
So
similar stuff.
so when you actually finish this boot camp, you for sure you had like some kind of projects that you have done in there that you could put on your portfolio. So these kind of projects that you had in there, what was it different from your own personal projects from before, and what made it now so or easier, to get a job now after you finish your boot camp?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say it was easier to get a job. It made a better transition, right? Because you had been coding for so long, but it definitely wasn't easier. But the difference in the projects was, I think the big difference is the time that you had to complete them. Like I mentioned earlier, this was your full-time job. And so when I was in college, sure, going to school was my full-time job, but I also was a business and a computer science major. So I wasn't doing strictly coding all the time. I was doing business and coding. So I wasn't really focused on that one thing. So I think that's what made the difference with the projects as well, because I had more time to really dive into it and to really try to figure things out with coding and everything, and try to figure out, okay, how do I really solve this problem, and how do I really make this code work, and how does this language really work? So I had more time to figure that stuff out, and I think that made the big difference in the projects.
Hmm. So now that you finished like the boot camp and you had all these projects, how was it now different from before that you didn't had the boot camp experience? So for example, now you were applying for jobs, and were the recruiters coming after you telling you the same, like, oh, you don't have enough experience, or what they were telling you? Now you have
Mhm.
experience, so what was different?
Well, some of them still were saying, well, you don't have any real work experience, right?
Right.
So you
Still,
still
still,
have that
still after,
problem.
still after your boot camp, they were still telling you that you didn't have enough experience.
Yeah, some of them were. It takes that one person that to give you the opportunity,
Exactly.
and in order to get that opportunity, you have to pour yourself into your projects, and you have to pour yourself into coding. So what I did after the boot camp, and even during the coding boot camp, we had we had to create a project for every language that we did. So we were supposed to have three projects, and I did have three projects. And then we also had things called, they had exams as well. So we would take we had 4 hours to create a whole application from the language that we took like 4 weeks to learn.
Hmm.
So that helped as well, because it's kind of like a time crunch kind of thing. It's like, dude, I have to get this done in 4 hours. I have to code. And I think that helped a lot too, because it's like, okay, let's do this, right? Let me just focus for 4 hours and get this thing done. So that helped as well. So you also had projects that stemmed from your exams. You had projects from just regular projects each month that you had to have. And so you ended up with a lot of material if you followed through with everything, not to mention the assignments that we were doing, right? You build on those assignments. I didn't really do that too much. I focused more on the projects and the exams. So I didn't really take any of my assignments and make them into my portfolio. I didn't put those into my portfolio. I used that for projects and the exams to do that. But the biggest thing is you have to put yourself into it. And what I ended up doing was I was trying to find volunteer activities as well, like that had to do with like web development, to like try to further justify to other people. Like I knew I can do it, but if people don't believe in you, then they're not going to give you a chance. So I was like, okay, let me, sort of prove to everybody else like I could do this. So I did like volunteer projects, and then I just around that same time, I built my own website and, started to, put things on my portfolio. I was also still working on the Coding Dojo stuff. We had access to like their platform, which was like the structure that led us through all of the languages. And I was still on there actively, learning things and trying to brush up on material and things like that. So honestly, the biggest difference is like, I was really into it this time, whereas the last time I was kind of like, well, I did this stuff before, like hire me. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm actually like really into it, and, going to the meetups and being involved into it, I think really made a difference. And people could see that. I definitely had interviews where it was kind of close. I could have got the job, but I didn't get the job. But I got a lot of feedback as to like, keep building up your portfolio. And so I that's what I tried to do. I kept trying to do that just to, further prove to myself. I was on GitHub a lot and pushing code and stuff like that. So it's all about being active in what you're doing and
never
making
stop.
sure, exactly. Never stop learning and never stop coding or anything like that. So that was the biggest thing for me. And then, even sometimes you do all that work and people still don't recognize, but I believe there's always that one person that's going to be like, you know what, this person has, good skill set. Yeah.
You really can't stop really trying, because some people, they just like get demotivated and stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you as well was like, when you were getting like these interviews that you were going like from some job interviews, were you applying by yourself, or was it like from recruiters that they were contacting you and arranging all these interviews and stuff?
I tried to do a lot of, okay, here's the thing. I don't really like recruiters that much. I'm not a big fan. And the reason was like, from my prior experience and them saying, well, you don't have the experience and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but you don't even know what the languages that I'm doing are. Like, you don't even know about it. So they were just going by, well, the person wants 2 years of experience, or 2 years work experience, and I don't see that 2 years of work experience. So it's a little bit more difficult working with recruiters. I did give some of them a chance. I'm not gonna not work with a recruiter, but I did a lot of like trying to find actual companies and apply to those companies. So hopefully I can get in touch with a actual hiring manager at that company that knows more about the position. Because only they can decide what they're wanting to hire for, and if you're going to be fitting for that position. So I worked with them, but some of them weren't that great. But hey, you learn and you learn a lesson, and you move on, and you take that experience and you apply it to the next one. So it's good.
Exactly. And do you think like when you were learning in this bootcamp, you said that you were learning JavaScript, PHP, Ruby. You think like being a full stack developer, because you are working in the front end and on the back end together, because there is a lot of people who are starting out, they just want to focus on the front end. Do you think like working as a full stack web developer, like learning everything, was making it easier for you like to get a job?
That's a difficult question, because I've saw some people and I've heard and blogs and things where people are like, well, you can't be a junior developer and be a full stack developer. And I was like, I don't really think that's true. So it kind of depends on what the company is looking for. It kind of goes back to the company. But is if it's, you can't really say if it's easier than one or the other. I think it all depends on what you want to do. So for me, I knew I wanted to be that full stack web developer. And I had the pieces to be a full stack web developer before. I just didn't put them all together at all. So once I put them together, I was like, well, this is cool, because you could work from front to back. So I enjoyed doing that. what the person I mentioned before about the coding bootcamp that left and went to a different coding bootcamp, she went to a different coding bootcamp because she wanted to focus on the front end. And I think that's why I tell people like, hey, focus on what you want to do. Like figure out what you want to do first, because that'll help mold the rest of where you want to go. Because if you want to focus on front end, you're going to go towards more front end stuff. Or if you want to do more back end or, that sort of thing. So I don't necessarily say it was easier or more difficult or anything like that. I think it was more like the passion and what kind of applications you're putting out. Like all the applications I put out were full stack web applications. So you could see that from my portfolio and stuff like that. Like that's what I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah. So after all of these, if you are just now looking a little bit back in time, and if you could start now everything again, what would you make like different? If you could start now, if you were starting now from zero again, you were trying to learn something, and you don't know if you are going to a boot camp or not, or you're gonna whatever. What would you do different, and what would you advise to everyone out there who are just starting out and they are just like so confused because there is so much information out there that people they just get completely lost. So what would be like your advice, and what you would do different?
Yeah, so my biggest advice is to talk to people that are doing what you want to do. I think that's the biggest advice I can tell anybody, because a lot of people they'll be like, oh, well, this looks cool. Let me do this. But you don't really know about it because you're not in that industry. You're not in that field. You don't really know the ins and outs about it. So my biggest thing would be to say, hey, go speak to somebody about what you want to do. And following up to that is, I know people are going to say, well, how do I do that? Well, I suggest like meetups. You could also look at blogs and things like that and reach out to people who have blogs. They don't mind. Trust me, they don't mind. They want you to reach out to them, or else they wouldn't be making the blog. Exactly. So I would say reach out to those people that you find and just, start the conversation. Hey, I want to do this. Do you have any advice? Or, hey, what do you think about this? I think that's the biggest thing that you could do. As far as differences, what I would do, I have a difficult time with this because I don't really know what I would do differently. I feel like everything fell into place as it should have fell into place, but it's not going to be that way for everybody. So the biggest thing that I'd say is to make sure this is what you want to do. That's the biggest thing before you start any process. Like, get that confirmation, like this is what you want to do. And the biggest way to do that is to learn from free resources. So, that's the biggest thing I've got. I wish I had something that I would do differently. I know there's something, because I'm pretty sure throughout the years I'm like, dang, I should have did this.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I didn't do that. But I guess the biggest thing would be to like maybe get into it sooner. That's my biggest regret, I think, is that I didn't get into it sooner, is that I didn't start learning on my own sooner in order to transition earlier on in my career. But
yeah. So
sorry, it's not a better answer.
No, it's perfectly good. So for many people, they just say all the time, like, this is back what you said before a little bit about like motivation, that you were doing your coding bootcamp like 8 hours and you were still coming home, and you were still like coding after the bootcamp and everything, and so what was it keeping you, like the motivation was really like because you loved it? Because there is a lot of people out there that, oh, I can't, I have my full-time job and then I don't have energy when I come home to do this, do that, so really how was like your motivation? Was really because you love this, or you wanted to get a better job, or?
Yeah. So when I was in the boot camp and I'm doing this 8-hour days and I'm going home and I'm coding some more, the biggest motivation for me was like, I don't have a job right now. And so I have to make sure that I'm using the time that I have in order to learn the skills I need so I can get that job later on. So for me, it was all about, I have to learn these things. I have to go through this thing in order to get to where I want to be. And I think that's with anything. Like even if you aren't doing a full-time boot camp, I was a TA at a part-time boot camp as well. And a lot of those students worked full-time jobs and they came and were doing the boot camp part-time. So it's possible. It's all about what you want to do and like if this is something that you actually want to do for yourself. It all goes back, I think, to passion and determination to get to where you want to be. And if you don't have that drive to get to where you want to be and to be better and to get into this field, then I don't think that it's going to work out for you. It may, I don't know. But for me, I don't think that if you don't want to do it, then you're not going to want to do it every day. So
Exactly. So I just have now a few last questions now. And one of them is really like, if you have like any YouTube channels, any books, or something like this that you could recommend to anyone out there to check them out, that you were watching a YouTube channel that motivated you, or some kind of books that you were reading into web development or something, if you want to like share with everyone out there, just to help them out. And
yeah, so a lot of the channels I was looking at, it was called Dev Tips, which he's not in charge of the channel anymore,
Yeah.
but he had a lot of like web development stuff on there back a couple years ago, but it was still some good information.
Before he
and
got
I
hired into Google.
yeah, until he got busy. But hey, that works out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one big channel that I would look at a lot. And a lot of the stuff here, let me cheat looking at my phone. Because I would listen to a lot of podcasts as well, and they were very helpful to me, like just to stay motivated. So Code Newbie, I don't know if you've heard of Code Newbie.
No. Is it a channel?
It's actually a podcast,
Right.
and they have like a weekly Twitter chat as well. So if you're just getting started.
So Code Newbie.
Yeah, so Code Newbie is a good one. I was listening to some things that didn't have anything to do with coding, but it was still some good stuff. But I did a lot of podcasts when I was doing it, because a lot of times when I was at work, I'd be listening. It's easier to listen to a podcast than a video on YouTube. And then as well as on the train, it's easier to listen to the podcast than to be on YouTube. But the book I'd recommend is one I think that you have on your channel already, and it's that John Duckett, JavaScript and HTML. Yeah, that's the one.
This one, yeah.
That's the one. I referenced that a lot. I remember I had like an interview, and not an interview, but I had to do like a coding exercise, and they wanted me to build everything from scratch.
Really?
And I had to go and look up some stuff, and I was like, I'm so glad I have this book. It was amazing. But yeah, so I definitely say, look up Dev Tips. That's a good one. And then I'm pretty sure there's a lot of others that I'm just blanking on at the moment. But like I said, I did a lot of podcasts. So
Code Newbie and Dev Tips. So everyone, if you want to check out.
Yeah. I was also on, let's see. I said, these aren't really coding related, but Design Matters. It was just nice to hear people talk about anything to do in tech. That's what I like. Shop Talk, that was a good one. The Shop Talk show. They did a lot of coding stuff on there as well. So they've got tons of episodes, so you can't be bored.
Yeah. Obviously, when we are at work or we are just at home, it's always good to listen, because, for example, me, I also listen to a lot of these podcasts or these kind of things. It's always good to hear other people's opinion, and you just have an overall knowledge. And yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
So yeah, I think that was like most of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Everything is covered. And just one last thing. How long have you been now, like in a full-time job as a web developer since you started?
It's been since July of this year, so it hasn't been long. I think it's like 4 or 5 months.
So right, so you're like 4 or 5 months, and now that you are in the actual job, like doing professional stuff, like for business and stuff, how much do you think that you progressed? Do you think that you are still about the same when you started, or do you think that now that you are actually doing real work, real applications and everything,
Yeah.
did your skills like really improved, or how was your experience so far?
Yeah, I'd say they've improved. I think the biggest thing on the improvement is having to look at other code that I didn't write.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, oh, that's another way to do it. So it's kind of like getting a different perspective as well from the way other people code. But yeah, I'd say they improved. A lot of what I'm doing is in a language that I had not learned before. So
Which one?
I'm like, they use Cold Fusion
Ah,
and it's
right.
like from Adobe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know anything about this, but on the front end, they're still using like JavaScript and jQuery.
Hmm.
So that's good. So I was like, I'm familiar with this stuff, but with the Cold Fusion stuff, it's definitely improving. I like it because there's like one specific website that I go to like learn stuff about Cold Fusion, and it really is helpful. And yeah, I've been definitely improving there and trying to figure out how to make things work. I was a little nervous to do things because that's more on the back end side of that language,
Hmm.
and I hadn't done it. Cause so I was like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about doing this, but I'm lucky because the people I work with were like, hey, Tiffany, just can you do this? And I'm like, okay, I could figure out how to do this.
So,
So
back to this, what you were saying, that most of the people that they are starting out, they still don't know that in an actual job, you don't need to know everything, that you can just go and search at the moment. I don't know this, but I can go to Google straight away and do some search and everything. So is it the same for you?
yes, absolutely. Like every day, every day I'm searching something for the most part. And it's fine. It's totally fine. Like if you have to look up things, nobody's going to look at you some strange way. Not at all. Even the senior developer, he's like, oh, I don't know. Let me look that up. So, I mean, everybody is searching one way or another because somebody has done it before. So
Exactly.
it's best to, to get their standpoint on it rather than having to go create it from scratch when it's something already there.
Exactly. It's like you don't need to reinvent the wheel again, if
Yes,
it's already.
exactly.
So
That's the
there's
saying.
also something else that many people, they are afraid. It's like they are in the actual job and they are afraid. Oh my God, I don't know how to do this, and they are just like afraid. They don't talk with anyone, and they're afraid they are getting fired or something, and they're afraid to go and ask help to their colleagues or something. Because I think it's like quite natural, like you are bouncing ideas with your colleagues when you are stuck in some code because you have been looking at it for, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours, and sometimes just a
Mhm.
little bit of fresh air. So how was your experience with this?
Oh yeah, definitely. So my rule is like oh man, I spend a few hours trying to look at something on my own because sometimes it's me and I know it's me.
Hmm.
So I try to make sure that it's like, okay, can I figure this out on my own? Can I,
Exactly.
figure that out? So I spend some time trying to figure it out on my own. And if I get stuck, I'm going to the senior developer and I'm like, hey man, what is wrong? What am I doing wrong here? And so a lot of times it's something small,
Yeah.
but it's something that I wouldn't have seen, just staring at it forever. You don't want to
Exactly.
stare too long at something.
Obviously, like you said,
Yeah,
you don't want to come across like too needy. Like
yeah.
you are going after them all the time. You encounter just some small problem. You need to give it some time, of course, like you said, and try it by
Mhm.
yourself. But after a while, that you see that nothing is happening, is really better just like to talk with someone else. Yeah.
Yes, I was trying to do some debugging stuff. And like I said, I'm not familiar with Code Fusion. I'm like, how do I see, like in JavaScript, you have console.log, right?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have that. So I'm like, how am I supposed to see this stuff? So I ended up going and talking to the senior developer. He's like, oh, yeah, here's how you do this. And I'm like, oh, well, this is helpful. So that's something I wouldn't have been able to figure out on my own because I'm like, I have no idea how this works. So things that you completely don't know about, it's perfectly fine to go ask for help. Again, like you were saying, don't go all day like, hey, help me now with this one again. Help me again. You don't want to be that needy, but definitely if you get stuck where you can't work, like go find help. Right. And then it
Exactly.
also helps to like take breaks throughout the day. Get up, stretch your legs. I sit down entirely way too much. So whenever I get to the point where I'm like, dude, I need to get up, I just get up
So
and,
get some
and
fresh
I'm
air.
walking. Yeah. So like you gotta clear your mind because sometimes like you'll be staring at something trying to figure something out and it's right in front of your face. So when you get up and you kind of rid yourself of that, your computer
Mhm.
screen, then you're able to come back with a new perspective on things.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Right, it was really really good so far the interview, and I just would like to thank you so much for accepting, like I said in the beginning, this invite to come in here. And finally, I would just like to ask you to recap, just like to tell everyone now, would you advise them? They are now starting. What do you advise, like to start learning some language, or places to go, boot camps, books,
Mhm.
podcasts? Just let them know now in this final brief.
Yeah, so definitely, I guess I'd start out with JavaScript if you want to learn how to code. Of course, HTML, CSS, stuff like that, but definitely get into JavaScript, learning just conditionals and all that stuff. That's very important stuff, and I think the best way to learn it is in JavaScript. So go ahead and learn that first, and then also get in touch with other people in your community that have done what you're trying to do before. I can't stress that enough. So meetups and even on LinkedIn, go stalk some people. Don't get crazy. And then definitely go check out blogs and things like that. Get as much information that you can on stuff so that you're able to have the most resources from different people. So different people have different perspectives. So get their perspectives on things. And then like I mentioned, that John Duckett book is a good one to check out if you get stuck in JavaScript or just want to have like a quick reference to things. That's really good. The Code Newbie podcast is another one that's good if you want to keep in touch with other people that are just starting out. And then they also have that weekly Twitter chat. So it's hashtag Code Newbies, I think is what it is.
Mhm.
So it's every Wednesday at like 8 p.m., but it's Central Standard Time in America. So
Right.
yeah, so yeah, that's all I got.
Great, great. So, like I said, thank you so much, Tiffany, again for being in here. And yeah, guys, if you want to check out Tiffany's channel, I'm gonna put it in the link on the description. And yeah, go check her out because she has awesome videos, and check out how was her experience and everything. And yeah, Tiffany, thank you so much for coming. And yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me.
thanks so much, and take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.